Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we get you smart fast.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're jumping into some pretty radical ideas about the future.
Yeah, specifically looking at Jacques Fresco's vision, drawing from that Venus Project study guide.
Right. We're talking huge societal changes, technology flips, basically rethinking everything.
Values, money, the whole structure.
So our mission today, pull out the key insights, the really thought-provoking stuff about where we could be headed.
Both the tech possibilities and, maybe more importantly, the shifts in how we think and organize ourselves. It's a lot to unpack.
Definitely. Okay, so where does Fresco start? He uses this image, right? Earth from space.
Yeah, the overview effect. Astronauts see this unified planet, no borders.
But then they come back down and, well, still the same divisions, the same problem.
Exactly. He points out, none of them are campaigning to remove those barriers, despite that perspective shift.
It makes you think about how entrenched things are.
Mm-hmm. The inertia is powerful.
And Fresco's pretty blunt. No one's coming to save us. It's on us.
Totally. He contrasts the speed of tech, how fast that's moving, with how slowly our values and societies adapt.
That gap feels... It feels like the central problem sometimes.
It really does. Because
Yeah.
the tech's potential is there, but it's filtered through our old ways of thinking.
Which brings us to this idea of a future beyond toil, where maybe you don't need to work just to live.
Right, thanks to technology and automation. It sounds amazing, but he also touches on our anxieties about it.
Yeah, the fear of machines taking jobs, AI dominance, that whole love-hate relationship.
I guess is a huge question. If work isn't central, what is? What gives life meaning then?
Exactly, and that leads straight into reevaluating our values. Are the ones we have now fit for, like the cybernetic age?
Fresco argues probably not. He thinks past thinkers were maybe too limited by nationalism, ego, focused too much on just individual impacts of tech.
So can values based on, scarcity and competition really work if we achieve abundance?
That's the core question he poses. It's a fundamental shift he's calling for.
But it's not all doom and gloom. He's actually quite optimistic about technology's potential.
Oh, definitely. He envisions using it to end hunger, war, poverty, a world totally different from our current path.
He talks about restoring the environment, improving well-being, all through technology, applied intelligently.
But that intelligently part is key. It requires conscious choice, doesn't it? Using tech for the collective good.
Right, not just letting it happen. Which is why he calls for such a radical reevaluation of our culture.
He sees things like war and poverty not as inevitable, but as, unacceptable failures of our system, preventable failures.
Things we could actually design our way out of.
Yeah, that's the next step, isn't it? Consciously designing a future society.
Thinking about resources, human needs, maybe even using AI to get past messy power politics.
Using AI for planning, resource allocation, that's a huge departure from how decisions are made now.
And then, this is a big one, the idea that money itself might just become obsolete.
Right. If resources are abundant and production is automated, what's the point of money? It seems almost inefficient.
He uses architecture as an example. How we need hyper-efficient buildings, infrastructure, a whole overhaul for abundance.
It makes the resource-based idea very concrete. You can picture how the physical world changes.
And technology could free us from, the mundane stuff.
Yeah.
Repetitive work.
Allowing for deeper relationships, more creativity, seeing the planet's resources as, a shared inheritance.
He wonders if people in the future will look back at us as being in a kind of dark age.
Yeah, an age of ignorance, almost. Why are great achievements so limited now? Is our system holding potential back?
Because we're products of scarcity thinking. Competition, winners, losers.
Yeah.
That's just baked in.
Even when it stops us doing things that would benefit everyone, he calls it primitive thinking we need to move beyond.
And get this, he even brings language into it.
How so?
Well, he argues that our language, developed in times of, scarcity and superstition, actually hinders clear thought.
Oh, interesting. Compared to, say, the precision of scientific language.
Exactly. Like an engineering blueprint, everyone understands it, no ambiguity. He thinks we need more of that clarity in society.
To avoid needless conflict based on misunderstanding.
He touches on past utopias, how they failed because they were stuck in the values and language of their time.
And how our own experiences filter new ideas, leading to misinterpretations.
So when we talk about changing culture, it needs constructive dialogue, not just ego-driven debate.
based on current knowledge, current resources, collaborative problem solving.
He even speculates language itself will evolve, maybe with AI help, becoming more multisensory, more precise.
Wow, the future of communication itself.
But here's a challenging bit.
Yeah.
He doubts understanding alone solves all conflict.
What does he mean?
Like, when fundamental values are just too different. His example is stark.
Yeah.
Nazis and Jewish people. Can dialogue bridge that? Or racists and
You
anti-racists?
have a sobering point. Sometimes the baselines are just incompatible.
He also talks about superstition persisting despite science. The difference between evidence and, well, emotionally driven beliefs.
That tension is always there, isn't it?
Though he notes, we rely on scientific principles constantly in daily life, often without realizing it.
True. Like when we trust a bridge or take medicine.
And the meaning of life. He suggests we create it, rather than find some inherent purpose. Understanding biology and society is more productive.
Shifting focus from the metaphysical to the tangible, the understandable.
So why do we cling to old ways that don't work? He blames ingrained thinking, vested interests.
And binary thinking. Good, bad, right, wrong. It's limiting.
He also criticizes siloed science education. It stops us applying scientific thinking more broadly.
Right. Science isn't absolute truth, just our best current explanation, constantly refined. We need to communicate that better.
He contrasts science's self-correction with the rigidity of dogma. Ignoring reality just hinders progress.
And leads to scapegoating simplistic answers.
And forget any golden past. He debunks that nostalgia pretty quickly.
History wasn't simpler or better, just different, often harder.
And points out that science or religion can be co-opted by totalitarian regimes. Neither is immune.
A crucial warning.
Ultimately, science should guide us towards living with nature, understanding our interdependence.
Which makes you question priorities, right? Billions on defense, pennies on environmental research.
Yeah. Taking responsibility means embracing knowledge, understanding our place in natural systems.
Because change is the only constant, isn't it? From galaxies down to societies.
Yet resistance is huge. From those in power, obviously, but also just from people comfortable with the familiar, even if it's oppressive.
Inertia again. The fear of the unknown.
He uses examples of how technology forces change anyway, even in remote places. It just happens.
And historical examples of resistance, cavalry versus tanks, pilots versus drones. It's a pattern.
But the pace of change now. Since the Industrial Revolution, it's accelerated incredibly, maybe faster than we can cope.
And with global communication, the world shrinks. Understanding the implications is vital for survival now.
Clinging to the past, especially in developed nations, just means being left behind. Future generations will have different values.
Shaped by a high-tech world we can barely imagine. The internet, AI, the pace is unprecedented.
But he also says technology has its own momentum. You can't just force social change onto it too quickly without potential downsides.
Right, it needs careful integration.
It's interesting, he notes how shared threats unite us temporarily, like in alien invasion movies.
If only we saw our real global threats, climate change, resource depletion, pandemics, inequality, with that same unity.
Yeah, he lists them. Overpopulation, pollution, economic fragility.
Mm-hmm.
While a few powerful entities control most resources.
It's a stark picture.
And he criticizes media focusing on flashy future tech.
Without asking how it benefits everyone in our current money-based system, does it just widen the gap?
There's a lack of holistic planning, he argues, aligning society with the tech, and a reluctance to fully embrace automation.
Because it threatens the current economic structure, jobs, profit.
If things collapse, he predicts governments will just try to maintain the existing power structures.
Makes sense. Protect the status quo.
He even questions modern democracy, suggesting leaders often serve elite interests, not the general population.
So, appealing to politicians might be pointless if they lack the knowledge or will to tackle root causes, because they're part of the system.
Pretty much. He thinks real change only happens when things get so bad, people lose all faith in the old ways.
But that's dangerous too, right? People look for scapegoats, simple answers.
Exactly. Reason alone doesn't cut it in an irrational world.
Real change, he says, comes from what he calls biosocial pressures.
Like resource scarcity, war, disasters, things you can't ignore.
But change isn't always progress. It carries risk. People might even long for a mythical, simpler past.
He points out why small cooperatives often fail historically, lack of understanding of large-scale human behavior.
And that even with innovations, industrialized nations haven't really changed the fundamentals: property, accumulation, power.
Lots of people dream of a better world, but concrete plans that don't threaten the powerful are rare.
Solutions need to evolve, he stresses. Money was better than barter, maybe, but it's not the end game.
Our current institutions, social, political, international, power of cold, they're obsolete, he argues. They block progress.
Competition, scarcity, they breed distrust. Property rights, borders, they hinder global problem solving.
And again, that traditional past wasn't idyllic. It was full of hardship.
Today's problems are global. They need global solutions. The common good is planetary now,
He suspects a major crisis might be needed to force us off the monetary system.
leading to demand for alternatives. But the risk, he warns, is authoritarianism stepping into the vacuum if we don't have viable plans.
So all nations need a shift in thinking about themselves, the environment, resources.
And global cooperation and planning is the only way to avoid collapse.
Which brings us back to the resource-based economy, using resources efficiently for a high standard of living for everyone.
With multidisciplinary teams replacing old professions, focused on systems thinking, global communication.
He even suggests mobilizing resources like we do in wartime, but for social good in peacetime.
Because social change is continuous, it requires constant adaptation, integrating new tech thoughtfully.
He's really critical of the monetary system's core logic. Profit over human well-being.
Arguing that economic inequality is the root of stratification, nationalism, racism,
War, he calls the ultimate failure, the most inefficient use of life and resources.
and things like hunger, poverty, debt. There are other forms of violence built into the system.
Peace treaties are just sticking plasters if the underlying causes, the power imbalances, remain.
And think of the wasted human potential, people focused on monetary gain instead of enriching activities.
He calls it wage slavery. Most work just to survive. Even the wealthy are trapped maintaining their status.
And chasing material possessions doesn't lead to real fulfillment anyway.
Future generations might just see our era's focus on aggression and competition as bankrupt.
Yeah.
Intellectually and economically.
And democracy in this system. Often an illusion, he claims. Elites pull the strings.
Major decisions driven by corporate and financial interests, not the public good.
Freedom becomes linked to purchasing power. If you can't pay, you're not free. It's an illusion for most.
He points to the Federal Reserve as a private entity profiting from its control over the economy.
And fractional reserve banks lending money they don't have, fueling inflation, benefiting themselves.
He even quotes historical figures warning about this concentration of monetary power.
And how private lenders profit from war, how financial interests can actually perpetuate conflict.
The system subsidizes military spending, corporations, adding to debt, diverting from social needs.
Sometimes even using military force abroad to protect economic advantages at home. It's a bleak picture of how power works.
He quotes Rothschild. "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws."
Because true democracy requires equal opportunity, which just isn't the goal of a money system.
He uses a ski resort example. Development caters to the rich, demonstrating elite theory in action.
And hidden influences on infrastructure lobbyists pushing car-centric planning despite its downsides.
Urban sprawl, pollution, unaffordable transport,
Yeah.
consequences of those
Their priorities. And finally, the privatization of knowledge itself. Patents, commercialized science.
Scientists working for the highest bidder, locking up discoveries. That hinders progress for everyone.
It really does.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Fresco, wow. It really forces you to examine the foundations, doesn't it? Our structures, our values, especially with tech racing ahead.
Absolutely. It's provocative, to say the least.
Which leads to our final thought for everyone listening. What parts of our current normal might seem completely illogical, maybe even inhumane, to people generations from now, if they lived in that potential world of abundance Fresco describes?
Yeah, what unquestionable truths or values that we hold dear today might actually be the very things holding us back from a more equitable and sustainable future. Something to chew on.